Okay, everybody. It's 12:01 on my phone, 12:02 on my computer. As people join, we'll just go ahead and let them in. Thank you for joining us. My name is Isabel Gamara, and I have the privilege of serving as the PRSA president for Miami this year. We're so excited, and thank you so much to all our panelists who have joined us. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Natalie Alastri. Is that how you say your last name, Natalie?
Alatriste.
Alatriste, who will serve as our moderator today. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the PRSA Leadership Roundtable on how we can all overcome the current challenges. I'm Natalie Alatriste. I'm today's moderator, and I am also the Director of Communications and Community Engagement for Kendall Regional Medical Center. As everyone knows, the industry in the communications industry is constantly changing, but the COVID era has made it more difficult for personnel to stay engaged and invested. The hope is that you'll take away some positive insights to overcome the challenges of today's COVID era. I will be asking our panelists some questions, and at the end, we'll give the audience a chance to ask their own questions. Please use the chat feature, and we'll incorporate your questions in the latter part of the session. We'll get started by getting to know today's panelists. So panelists, please introduce yourself, give us your background, and also answer the question, how did you get into the industry? Let's start with April Donaldson.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me in such an esteemed group today. It's truly an honor. Thank you very much. So I'm April Irene Donaldson. I'm Senior Vice President of Hope Media Group. I began in the industry right out of college. I was always drawn to business and marketing, and I actually started as a marketing coordinator in the real estate sector and really worked my way up from there into media and tourism and ultimately advertising, media, national and global platforms. And thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, April. We're happy to have you. Next is Joni Fernandez Marmo.
Hi, good morning, or rather good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I echo April's sentiment. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. So I am currently an adjunct professor at FIU, teaching omnichannel marketing in the Master of Marketing program. Previously, however, my background was in media. So I spent well over 25 years working for Univision Communications, Spanish language media. And I started also out of college. I was an intern and really worked my way, throughout the company in different roles and just worked my way up. And then the last 7 years, I was the Senior Vice President of the creative agency and corporate and consumer marketing, also leading the art and design teams and the creative services team. So it was a really good ride. And now I'm enjoying the life of media, academia. So it's been great all around. Thank you.
Awesome, Joni, we're excited to hear about your experience. Victor Garcia, please give us a little introduction.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you for the welcome. My name is Victor Garcia. I'm a Senior Vice President, Managing Director for Publicis Group. I've been working in the media side of advertising probably for the last 20 years. I've worked at several holdings. I've been at Publicis Group the longest, for the last 15 years. I started in the US. I currently work on the LATAM side of the business. I fell into advertising by default. It was totally a mistake. I graduated from college with a psychology major. I didn't know what to do, but I had a strong math background because I minored in statistics. So they hired me in a media research capacity at Havas. This was 20 years ago, and that's how I kind of fell into this. And I liked it, and I continued my career in media. So it was totally by accident. I honestly didn't know this industry even existed while I was in college.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Victor. And lastly is Sujata Mitra.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for Natalie. I'm excited to be here too. I'm the SVP and Head of Earned Media Strategies for Edelman's DC office. Before Edelman, I ran comms for Vox.com and Recode, and before that, HuffPost, and before that, Roll Call. So a long time in communications roles at media companies. I actually started my career in journalism. I was a producer at WPIX in New York. I'm going to date myself, but I covered 9/11, and I won an Emmy for our 9/11 anniversary coverage. After after WPIX, I went to the McLaughlin Group, and then freelanced at Al Jazeera English before moving into PR. What got me interested in PR is actually I love the media aspect of everything, right? I mean, my career has primarily been in media, and working in media relations was an opportunity to blend the journalism in me with the opportunity to tell stories on behalf of companies, clients, missions that are really important to me. And fast forward 15 years later, I still love media relations.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to everybody's insights today. I'll be kicking it off with a question a little bit general, but definitely COVID related. What are the greatest challenges that you have faced during this pandemic, and how did you overcome those challenges? I'm going to give this question to April.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think working together as a team and really assessing the market conditions and coming up with a strategy very quickly, very systematically, and working together as a team. And that's something that we did here at Haute Living. Within the first week, we came up with an entirely new strategy to stay relevant in the marketplace, executed that strategy as a team, built on that strategy as a company, and that's carried us through where we are today.
Awesome. Same question, so I'll repeat it. What are the greatest challenges that you have faced during this pandemic, and how did you overcome those challenges? I want to hear from Sujata on this one.
Yeah, so I'm a working mom, out of the house working mom, and now I'm in the house working mom and have 2 kids, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it's those first few months when we first hit the pandemic, and all of a sudden my husband and I were both balancing our careers and had 2 small kids at home who in those first few weeks, there was no Zoom, there was no virtual learning. It was like both kids at home, a full schedule, and thank God our marriage survived it. But really just being able to balance the needs of your kids with the needs of your job, to me, that was really one of the greatest challenges. And I think the emotional well-being too, making sure that we're all taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves. And then from a professional lens, the health and well-being and the emotional well-being of my team was really important. My colleagues, everybody, all of a sudden, I think everybody's anxiety level was also at an all-time high. So just making sure we were all taken care of. Work-wise, I felt so supported by our company, which I think we saw the best of the best, kind of, if your employers really met the moment and made sure you were taken care of as you were coming to this like remote work setting. But definitely personally for me, the biggest challenge was just navigating being at home with the kids and balancing work.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could relate to that. So, the hope is that we continue to figure it out and move a path forward to get kids back in school safely and making sure that families are safe as well. All right, so my next question is going to be for Victor. What advice can you give to leaders on maintaining a good work environment when working from home?
So that's a really good question, by the way, because I think that's what I've challenged with the most. My role as a leader completely changed post-COVID. I think a few things happened and a few tips and a few things I did that helped me, and I would probably recommend to anybody who's a leader. First and foremost, you kind of need to change your perception of productivity. We need to give people space to have varying levels of productivity now that they're home. Some people are going to do very well in some areas. Some people are not going to do very well in some areas. The whole moving to a home-based working environment had a very profound impact on some people. So I think one of the things we did at Publicis is we made sure that we gave everybody space, not only to deal with this pandemic and this new reality at their own pace, but also change our expectations a little bit to make sure that we didn't overwhelm anybody during this process. Another tip I would give a leader is stay connected to your team. I think teamwork comes in two ways. You could delegate teams and work together on projects, and that's one way. But I think something very important that we lose in an office culture is that spontaneous run-in or that spontaneous, water cooler chat or just, seeing somebody and saying hello. I recommend leaders take an hour out of your week and just call a few people and ask them, how are you doing? Don't call them with a project. Don't call them to ask for an update or a status. Just ask them, how are they doing? Because I think that goes a long way in feeling connected to your team when you are a leader. I don't want to be a leader that just knows what people are doing and how well they're doing it. I actually want to know, how they're feeling, how they are navigating life, and definitely how they're navigating this new reality so that we can help them achieve their full potential.
Yeah, definitely. Those are really good points. And I think, it's easy to get lost in when you're in a working from home environment to not give yourself those breaks, and that can lead to exhaustion rather quickly. So two very good points by Victor. Thank you. Joni, question for you. What are the most important decisions you make as a leader of your organization? And did the pandemic make you change your decision-making style?
That's really good. I think, dovetailing a little bit from what Victor was saying about calling your employees and checking in and see how everyone was doing. I've always operated from a place of compassion and empathy and morale building and motivating people, especially in my world. I led creative teams. And so creatives, we can be very, emotional beings. And so there was a lot of that relationship building that is really important without losing sight of making sure that the business is running effectively and that you're hitting your targets and what your success metrics are, right? So part of that motivation is to be able to get people to do their best. So how do you do that in a pandemic environment is really challenging. I think it's about building those relationships in as much as you can. And yeah, it's, even sending a little, if you're going to have a lunch meeting, then send your team, a sandwich while you're all eating together in Zoom, everybody in their respective places, but also being cognizant of everybody's living situations, right? I've had, in my case, I wasn't really leading a team, I was teaching, right? And there were a lot of circumstances where in a master's program, you have to get your students to engage. And it's really hard to get them to engage when they have a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old sitting literally next to them, going through their schoolwork, right? So you have to make decisions based on being cognizant of where everyone is at any given moment. And then having that empathy to be able to adjust and also to communicate effectively. Like, what are your expectations? But part of the communication process is also to be a good listener. So it's also to be able to listen to the other person and, and make decisions based on that. So that would be my advice in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's, a level of flexibility that's definitely needed to manage from a remote location, and definitely, like you said, coming from a place of empathy to be able to understand the struggles that somebody is going through that may not be super apparent right then and there. So really good advice, Joni. Thank you. Okay, my next question, I will circle back to April on this one. What advice would you give someone going into a leadership position for the first time, especially in a time like this where a lot of things are remote?
Really echoing a lot of what I've heard and a lot of these answers, really understanding your team and looking at them as overall people and having a sense of empathy also having the overall big picture and knowing everything that needs to be done, working together collaboratively, but also looking at each individual as a total person. So really assessing all qualities of that individual, working together as a team, working together towards the total vision, and being supportive and being enthusiastic in all communication styles. Building, all your messaging should be building about collaboration and striving towards what that big end goal vision is.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree with that statement. All right. I will circle back to Victor on this one. What is one characteristic that you believe every leader should possess? And how can that be heightened even more during a time of COVID?
Well, I think I think it would have to be flexibility. You have to become agile. You have to become flexible. We need to be able to manage our expectations at any moment and change them. Change the way we work, change the design of our teams, change the designs of how we service our clients. Because one of the things that COVID has really taught us is how much things could change so quickly. And if you as a leader are not flexible enough to make changes in your style, in your belief system, in the way you operate a business or in the way you service a client, I think you'll fall behind. You become more of a barrier to success than actually somebody who's pushing a team towards success. So I would say post-COVID, everybody needs to be more flexible, and as a leader, you need to be more flexible in everything you're doing, every aspect of your desk.
If I could add to that, as which is such a good point about flexibility and also authenticity, and just owning that you're a leader, but you also have your own challenges, right? And you also, in other words, have empathy for yourself, and it's okay to show that there's certain vulnerabilities that you may be going through as a leader, and how can you rely on your team or ask your team to help you, right?
Yeah.
There's no shame in saying, I don't have the answer, let's figure it out together.
Joni, that is such a good point, because I could tell you, we went home the third week of March. I think the company said, everybody go home. It was like, we're 100 in my team. So all 100 of us were sent home in a matter of 2 days. Never worked remotely. We didn't have any type of remote kind of system or anything. And I could tell you, you're absolutely right in what you say. A lot of people would ask questions and I would be like, I have no idea. And I had to be very honest about it. I'm like, I have no clue. I barely know what's going to happen next week, let alone what's going to happen in the summer. And I think you're absolutely right. Coming from it from a very authentic standpoint made a big difference, and also gave you credibility, because if you made promises at one point that you couldn't keep as a leader, then nobody would trust you as a leader moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to echo both of you. Authenticity and transparency. I'll tell you what I know, and what I don't know, but I'm going to work as hard as I can to help get that information for you. I said that this morning. I said, we're trying to figure it out. Just bear with me, offer some grace. I understand where you're coming from. I understand where so many people are coming from. I'm going to do my best to get you an answer. Sometimes it's about, in terms of leadership, it's about seeing and hearing the people. You may not have the solution in that moment, but acknowledging that I see you and I hear you.
Very good. Yep. So true.
Yeah, there's definitely power in being vulnerable sometimes when you're a leader, because that just will always showcase that kind of like human emotion that you could easily connect with somebody, and that may make them even more, admiring of what you're doing, because they could see that you are both in the same struggle, in the same boat together. So there's definitely something to be said about that. Great answers all around. Thanks, guys.
I'd like to add something else just along those lines, and actually working together on projects as a team. You know, there's never one person that's a be all end all. It's always such a team effort, and everyone has their own sets of eyes and ears. And every single person has something that they can contribute that another person maybe is missing entirely altogether. And I think, you know, honing in on that collaboration, and that every single person has such a unique skill set and something to contribute. And again, you know, such a variety of the way people view things, and working together as an overall team and honoring that and pushing forward brings about maximum growth in any given project.
Do you think,
Awesome.
April, that in this environment that maybe some people's skills have changed or have enhanced, or, you know, like now that everything is so different, maybe somebody's skills in something that they didn't even know they had all of a sudden rose to the top, right? And that there's value in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like in this remote environment, it's almost like even though we're remote, the curtain peels back and people's like strengths and weaknesses, to be frank, have really shown through, because when you're in the office and you're going from meeting to meeting, it's easy not to necessarily see the actual work and skill sets. But now in this remote world, there's everything is there because nobody's traveling for business. It's all there. And so strengths and weaknesses have, I think, come out during this remote time.
For sure.
Definitely. It's a good point. So we got a question from, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say, Joni, what you were saying about, you know, new skill sets emerging. I know with our team members, there was a lot of that, a lot of emerging skill sets that you weren't necessarily aware of being there prior. I think because everything is so raw, and it's raw work that you're looking at and assessing, and you have to be able to cultivate and develop and figure out a lot of things in a changing market. And we've certainly had a lot of team members that have done that, and it's been very exciting. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. I feel like COVID has done a lot of that, and even personally too, right? So like outside of the office, you know, you start to see what really are you passionate about. I know that I went through that journey last year of, you know, kind of realigning myself, and it was really kind of eye-opening, and I feel like a lot of people have undergone a change like that. So definitely from a personal perspective as well. So we got a question from the audience. What is the key advice that the panelists keep top of mind when they're feeling discouraged or burnt out? So I kind of want everybody to answer this because I think it's a good question. We could start with Sujata.
Yeah, sure. I definitely felt burnt out. Feel burnt out. There's moments where it's like it feels like a constant like rinse and repeat of the day because you don't go anywhere. You're just in your house. You get up, you work. Some of the things that I've really been focusing on is well, first of all, I created a workspace at home, which I think is like the number one thing you need to have. If you're working from home, you need to have your dedicated workspace. So it feels like I get up in the morning, but then I go to work, and then I leave work when I'm shutting down for the day or wrapping up the day. The other thing is you got to take time for yourself. I got a Peloton like in January of 2020, so 2 months before the pandemic. And I say to this day, like that thing has saved me because working out and just having that hour in the morning to myself where I can just focus on my well-being and you know, my emotional health has been everything. It helps give me clarity. It helps give me energy. So whatever your that is, whether it's, you know, reading, writing, whatever your passion point is outside of work, find it and embrace it and really take care of yourself and your needs that are not work related. To me, that's been really key. And then, you know, at least for my team, like, look, when this pandemic hit, everybody was like full speed because work was full speed, and we're working a lot and we're delivering for our clients and we're delivering for our colleagues, and we're that's what, we do that because we're in this industry where that's what motivates us. But you have to be ready to say, okay, I've hit my limit. I'm not bringing my best self, and talk to your manager and find your friend or your colleague that you can have an honest conversation with, and use your employer resources. If your employers give you resources for wellness and mental health, use it. That's what they're there for. There's no shame in asking for help. If you're stretched too thin, ask for help. That's why you have a manager. That's why you have a team. That's why you have colleagues.
Definitely. Joni, do you want to go ahead and give us, what's top of mind when you're feeling discouraged or burnt out?
I'm laughing because I also got a Peloton.
I just purchased mine. Mine comes in 2 weeks, so I'm right there with you.
There's a commercial for Peloton now. Great.
That's why I started laughing when you mentioned it, because it's become like, that's been my saving grace, frankly. And with marketing, it's all about the 4 P's of marketing. Well, in my case, my 4 P's have been prayer, patience, Peloton, and pool. I just kind of rotate those, because I agree 100%, Sujata, with what you mentioned about just giving yourself that space to just be. Like, I think in this world of where we all have technology, we've become obsessed with our phones and social media and being connected all the time, and feeling like if we're not productive, then we didn't do anything, then we're not worthy, right? At the end of the day, it's like we feel like we had to have checked off a million boxes. And sometimes it's just good to just be in where, and just stopping and breathing and just, being in a moment of silence. Even something as simple as that, giving yourself 5-10 minutes of just calming the mind is so helpful, because it actually, you're able to find answers. You're able to just rest, recharge. There's a lot to be said for that. And in this environment of everything is a virtual meeting, I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, like, I get exhausted, like my eyes, I get headaches. So it's okay to just acknowledge that that's a thing. And just communicate that. And again, as going back to being leaders, acknowledge that's an issue, and work it through with your teams. And, if you're not a leader in a leadership position, then, like was mentioned before, just bring it up and see how you can give yourself that balance, because it is hard. It is hard when you're working from home and all of a sudden now you're working 12-hour days where before you weren't.
Before you weren't, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Victor, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think they covered most of the things. The thing I would say, and I'm going to give you guys a personal story that kind of builds on this. When the pandemic hit, my office where I work lost about 30% of their business because we had a lot of luxury and travel. So obviously we were worried for our jobs. I'm not even going to lie to you. I was worried for my job personally. Our entire team was worried for their jobs because the pandemic hit. And when you're worried for your jobs and you're stressed and you're looking at, your productivity, it creates a lot of stress and it's hard to disconnect. And I did a lot of the methods I think that were covered now, having a routine, having a dedicated workspace, working out, finding things to do. But I struggled with turning off my internal dialogue, because I would leave my office, but I still had the internal dialogue, the voice that speaks to you, your deep thoughts. And that was the hardest piece for me to turn off during this pandemic. So my recommendation is, what I do is when I get stressed out, overworked, I said, I need to turn off this dialogue. Usually I do that by doing something that keeps me busy. I have to get, I'll start doing something else. I'll start reading something, or I have to do something different. I'll get on TikTok. I have to completely disconnect, because if I just sit there to work out, I would find myself just going through this internal dialogue, and I wasn't really disconnecting. I was disconnecting physically, but not mentally. What I would say is it's very important to disconnect physically and mentally, because if not, you're really not resting. You're fooling yourself by your actions or fooling the people around you, but you're really not resting internally. And I think it's really important you know yourself and really take that deep perspective and shut off that dialogue and do whatever you have to do. I used to do it when I worked in the office by commuting. I commuted, I had to commute like 30 minutes from our office to my house. So that was the time when I kind of like ran through all the day. I got home and I kind of just distracted myself on other stuff. Because I don't have that routine anymore, I found myself just carrying it all night. And with the stress, it just got worse. So I would definitely, that would be one advice I would give you: shut off that dialogue the minute you find yourself overwhelmed. And hopefully that can help.
Victor, that's really powerful what you just said, because I really identify with that. I struggle with that too. I think it's a symptom of being in leadership roles because we have so much, we have a lot of pressure on us too.
Yeah.
Same kind. I think you and I have same kind of like pressures on us, and I had that same thing. I agree with you, like finding that thing that helps you mentally turn it off. For me, actually, I started reading physical books.
Yeah.
Like actual books, because even if you try to read a book on Kindle or whatever, you're still looking at a screen. And I think looking at a screen is a trigger for that internal dialogue. So like reading a book helped a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Turning off your brain is the
It's
hardest.
hard. It's hard.
And when you wake up in the middle of the night and try to go back to sleep and your brain just starts, that is the worst.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
But I will tell you know what really works too, like when you have a creative outlet, like
Yes.
believe it or not, the adult coloring books are amazing because you start to really focus on what colors am I going to use, and like you really get into this other world, and it really becomes a good exercise to just shut off the inner voice and focus on something else. Just something as simple as that.
Yep.
Yeah.
April, anything to add?
Yeah, really along those lines, personally for me is finding time for silence every day. Joni, I liked what you said. You can find the answers in silence. And I think when you're going through your day at a whirlwind pace, 12, 16-hour days, and it's a whirlwind. And to set that up, I think there's a lot of planning and a lot of structure. So it's just a nonstop cycle. But finding that moment in your day for total silence and taking a few deep breaths is imperative, at least for me. And also I think there's something to be said for nature. I make that a part of my day every day. I think there's something to be said for sunshine and fresh air, and that's another time just to think. I run in the morning and also in the evening, and that time of just being out in fresh air, the sunshine early in the morning, and if they're flowers or nature, there's something very calming and very grounding about that. And that's been imperative for me in my daily schedule. It's almost like a reset and a grounding, and having that integrated into every day has been imperative. And that's really warded off and prevented, ever feeling overwhelmed. It's like having that reset every day. And you can also find a lot of answers in that time, because your brain is a lot more relaxed and open, and you can actually do a lot of problem solving in that time as well.
Very true. Yeah, the nature, the disconnecting and being in nature has always helped me. Whether it's I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to, music, and just being out in nature and just having time to yourself and not looking at your cell phone. That's probably like the best kind of time that you can take for yourself. Okay, we have another question from the audience. Have you had to lay off anybody, and how did you handle that during the pandemic, because of the pandemic? I'm going to start with Victor, because you kind of nodded to this.
So we did. We had to lay off, unfortunately, I would say close to 30% of our team. So probably a good 20 to 30 people from the team in our office. So our office shrunk significantly, again, because a lot of my business was tourism and luxury, both which, Disney, Marriott, Hermes, all these brands just completely shut down during the pandemic, because obviously people weren't traveling, people were not buying luxury goods. It became a little bit of an issue for us. How did I manage it? It was hard because for the first time, it was my first time doing something of this scale, as terms of reduction of this scale. Typically, a lot of in the past, most of the stuff we've done, or I've personally had to do, was based on performance. So, oh, look, this person's not great. They got a performance review, and it's almost like you see it coming. So it doesn't. By the time you get there, you're kind of glad, and the other person receiving it is glad because they want to be done with this relationship. In this case, it was hard because we had to sever good people, good talent. And I think when you have to go through the exercise, it could have been very easy for us to go in and say, okay, for every piece of business we lost, business for, or lost billings or revenue for, it, we'll just cut those people. Well, it's not that simple, because you literally had to look at the performance of everybody in the organization at every level and really pick and choose, not people who were bad versus people who were good, but people who were best for your future. And it's very important, the future piece, because sometimes you have very good performers that are very good for the present, but if you know your future is going to be different, you're better off severing them now than carrying them to the end and then not being able to progress to the future. In our business and media, our future is data, our future is digital. We're becoming more about CRM. We're becoming more about, more personalized experiences in media versus mass media. So I may have a great, excellent TV buyer, for example, but I know the future of my business is not in traditional video. Therefore, those are the kind of areas where we decided it would be best to make a change. But it was not an easy process, and by no means, I hope I never have to go through it again. And honestly, some people that we had to sever, I hope one day we could bring them back if there's the right opportunity, or if our business recovers to a certain degree.
April, what about you? Have you had to lay anybody off, and how did you handle it?
We have done a lot of transitioning as a business, and Victor, I liked what you said about looking at the future, and you're going towards that future vision and building accordingly in accordance with that. So our totals have all stayed the same, but we've shifted in a lot of ways in terms of team members and where we're looking for new team members, and it's been a big shift. But our sizing has stayed the same and is actually growing. And that's obviously it's a difficult time period to be in. So I can relate to a lot of things that you said, Victor.
I think the difficulty is, and I just want to add this, it's very different to have any type of staff reduction in a stable market, because most of the people that work, at least at Publicis, are good. It's good talent, people that could easily find another job. In the pandemic, you could be the best at your role. There were just no jobs available. So to send somebody out to the market during that time period was very difficult for us. And by the way, we protected as many jobs as possible. We gave up margin. We gave up, as a group, Publicis gave up margin. We launched opportunities for people who were based in Miami to work outside of the P&Ls, because we just wanted to preserve as many jobs as possible. I think at the end, Publicis was able, as an organization, to protect, I think it was over 10,000 jobs across the world by doing this flexible model. But unfortunately, for some P&Ls, and specifically for Miami, there was just no way I could sustain the entire team. But it was more difficult than ever before, also because I knew these people were going to go to in a market where it was very difficult to find employment. So hopefully I know it's gotten a little bit better now, or at least I hear it's gotten a little bit better now, and things are opening up, and hopefully, at least in South Florida, hopefully that will help the industry as a whole.
Joni or Sujata, did you also have to let anyone go? And if so, how did you handle it?
Well, thankfully not during the pandemic, because of my role. I was a professor, but I've had to do that in the past, actually significantly. It's very painful. it's very painful to go through that process as a decision maker, and then obviously for the person that's impacted. And lastly, how do you motivate the teams after all is said and done, right? So how do you keep people connected, engaged, feeling like it's going to be okay, let's move forward? That really is the hardest part of, well, not, I shouldn't say the hardest part. I think the whole thing is painful, but it's very difficult. The aftermath, right, of how to get everybody to stay focused on the work and continuing to move forward is very challenging. And even for yourself, how do you stay focused and frankly, and shrug off the guilt, because there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. It's a very difficult process, and it's tough. The last time I did that was 2 years ago, and I still struggle with it, in terms of the decisions you have to make. But I do agree, Victor hit on something that's really important. And I would always say this to my team, and this was pre-pandemic, right? And it's like, you have to have a growth mindset, for yourself as an individual, as a professional, stay on top of your game, learn new things, learn new skills, read the trades, just be on top of things so that you're always relevant in some way, or that you can always shift to something new. Because that, at the end of the day, decisions that are made about you and your career are made when you're not in the room.
And Joni, I just was going to add to that, use your network. One of the things that I was really encouraged by, I'm sure you all saw it on LinkedIn, was people willing and ready to make introductions for those that were now in the job market. And that, for me, as communications and marketing industry, I think we really came through there, when we were offering our network to help people who needed help. That to me, I think, don't be afraid to go ahead and start using your network, asking your colleagues and your friends to open up their networks for you.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, definitely. And we're communicators, and we're used to being that liaison, between a corporation and an audience, and we should be able to do that for others when it comes to helping them get a job. So definitely agree with that. Okay, so I have a question about trends. What is the most interesting trend that you've seen in 2020 to 2021 that came from the COVID era? That you think that all communicators should keep an eye on? And I kind of want to position this in two ways. One is from a working from home perspective, or just like an operations perspective, and then another from a media perspective and a communications perspective for an external audience. So let's start with April. I'll ping you for this one first.
Natalie, clarify. So the working from home perspective, how would you apply that there? What would the specific?
Yeah, just like an operations perspective, like, I mean, obviously Zoom has been a trend. So, like from a managing and leadership perspective versus an industry perspective for communicating to an external audience.
Yeah, so for an individual, teammate perspective, an operational role perspective, a lot of great content was covered, I think, in setting a specific area that's your work area, having a schedule. Zoom, obviously, we were all extremely dependent on Zoom. I mean, that would be a given. But a lot of great answers already on that about the structure and having the separate work area. And, having a routine where you're really able to refresh and do that day in, day out without getting burned out. We actually opened up our offices, and I've seen some questions on the chat a little bit about team members, that want to continue to work at home, or the hybrid model, which maybe comes up a little bit later. But we opened up our offices back in mid-June for some, core teammates, and then we still have members working from home and the hybrid model and all the way across the board there. So that would cover the home side. And then I would say on the outward industry perspective, what I've noticed, it seems to be a larger percentage of traffic coming in on luxury marketing that's global in nature, much greater than I ever saw before. And that's something I want to continue to track. And it's a trend that shows up weekly. And
That's
of course,
interesting.
the prevalence of, being impactful from a digital standpoint, social media and marketing messaging, fine tuning and tweaking that as much as possible, that's imperative.
Absolutely. Joni, do you have anything to add to that from a trend perspective?
I think from the operational side, the obvious, right? The Zoom and some of the things that we've already talked about in terms of just that we're all in this together, right? And in the challenges. I don't know if that's.
Do you think that it'll like shift the way that? Do you think it'll shift expectation from leaders in companies? And do you think that it'll impact the way that we work in the future moving forward?
I do because I believe that a lot of companies, especially the smaller businesses, are probably going to start analyzing, do they really need to rent out office space and then just fully work from home? I don't know if that's going to be the case necessarily for bigger companies. So I do think that there is going to be a long-term, repercussion of this in terms of how people are going to work. But definitely the fact that everybody's in this, everybody has a different situation at home, but at the end of the day, we're all working from home, right? So the technology piece is something that people have to embrace. And I'm sure that there's going to be new softwares and new technologies that are going to start popping up, in the near future that we're not even thinking about right now, but are going to have an impact from an operational perspective. So again, just making sure that you're on top of your game and knowing what's coming down the pike. And I think in terms of external communication, I've seen, it's not necessarily a positive, but I just wanted to caution. I've seen that there's a trend in reactionary response from brands specifically. And I always wave that flag, and that's something that I try to teach my students, which is, and it's something that I talked about earlier about authenticity, right? As a leader, there's also something to be said about authenticity as a brand. So just before you go out and, put an official communication out there and all of that, just try not to be reactionary, respond, don't react, is what I would recommend, because sometimes in that reactionary mode, it can get messy. And then messier, and then how do you fix that? And then now you're fixing the fix of the fix of the fix, and it gets really complicated. So that's, it's a trend that I've seen, but I would also caution to,
Are you the appropriate brand to be commenting on something? Like that goes back to authenticity. What is the connection? Why now? Why this brand? Why you? From a earned media point of view, it has been a year and it continues to be a year. We are just, whether it's obviously Edelman is a huge company. We've got clients in healthcare, we've got clients in business. And so we're navigating the news cycle, both being asked to comment and then commenting. One of the things that I always say is that, these point of views, they have to be authentic, but we really, as earned media specialists, have to have a pulse on the newsroom. What are the reporters looking for, and how can we actually offer them something that's helpful? And then go back to the client. If the client wants to speak to something, let's make sure that what we're speaking to is actually saying something interesting, offering a differentiating point of view, and then of course making sure that it's positioning the company and the brand in the right way. But really, just in terms of media relations, just knowing what are reporters looking for, what are newsrooms looking for. The threshold is so high for news. Don't waste that opportunity when you engage a reporter. Make sure that it's what you're offering them is valuable and something that, you don't want them to write you off as somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's actually a question that we got in the audience. So tips and advice on working with this ever evolving news cycle. Victor, why don't you go ahead and answer a little bit of this one too?
A news cycle. I'm the worst person. I'm the paid media guy. But
Yeah, I guess you're right.
so
That is the
Jessica
wrong
did
person.
such a much better job than I can. Why are you asking me this question? No,
How about
I'll
we
tell
go
you.
back to you? We
I'll
go
tell
back
you
to
a few
you.
things. I'll go back to
No,
the
no.
first question that you
Okay,
just
that's what I was
asked.
going to say. Yeah, from an audience perspective, from external facing. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, in external facing, I'll tell you two things. First, from an office perspective, one of the big trends I've noticed, and I don't know if anybody else has seen this, is that office culture is moving to after hours. So we worked in a business where we would connect with our teams in the office. And what I've noticed, at least in my teams, is we're working during working hours, just working. And there's all this socializing outside of the office happening at people's homes or meeting somewhere, or teams are connecting outside of the office, where typically that wasn't the way. That wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So I would tell you, if you are somebody who's either working in an organization or leading an organization, I think we need to be ready to embrace the fact that we work during work hours, and maybe after hours, yeah, you will go have dinner with a coworker more often than you would normally, because now you don't see them, or with your boss, or go to somebody else's house. I've seen a lot of that happen across at least our group and our organization. As far as trends, and I'm going to give the more paid media trend piece, and it's more about, we are going into a cookieless world. Chrome is getting rid of all cookies, third-party cookies. Apple is going to have opt-in for privacy. There has been major litigation that's come public over the last few months about companies who have data and how they're using that data, and there's been lawsuits and litigation behind that. I think as professionals in communications, even from a PR or non-paid standpoint, we're going to run into a situation where what we do with consumer data is going to be very public and very transparent. And it's that transparency and that publicity on what we do with customer records, how we manage a relationship with the customer, and how we give them messages based on what we know about them. Balancing the intrusiveness and the effectiveness of a personalized message is going to be really challenging. In this new post-COVID era, we need to get more personal to give results and to be connected with audiences. But at the same time, we are going to be held accountable for having this information, and consumers are going to know that you have this information. So what is the negative equity that a brand suffers because you're using data to attract a user? I think that relationship is going to get really dynamic over the next 12 to 24 months when third-party cookies go away. Third-party cookies are very convenient. They kind of happen in the back end. Half of the people don't even know how they're being followed. As we get into more customer records, first-party data, as we make more stronger partnerships, as the walled gardens such as Google and Facebook become more important in the data ecosystem, I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on us as communications professionals as to how do we do this responsibly, and how do we represent an organization within a set of data and personalization responsibly. I think that's a big change that's coming, and I don't have an answer for it, but hopefully I'm sure a lot of smart people will come up with with something to do about it.
And a question on that. Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to ask if you've seen any trends from like a consumer, like how consumers are digesting their media or ads, or like consumer trends based on COVID. Like obviously we've probably spent more times on our phones. So
yeah, I mean, look, the trends are the ones we know. People are migrating towards more connected television platforms. Streaming is the place to be. Unfortunately, streaming is a horrible place for paid advertising because there's very limited options. So connected TV is growing at the cost of cable and more traditional screens. We saw this coming. The pandemic kind of amplified that. Luckily, last year being an election year, that helped us a little bit because there was a lot of news feed and a lot of news viewership. Coming into this year, 2021, it's going to be a little more difficult. Another interesting consumer consumer difference is that, movie theater releases are now becoming an in-house experience. How is that going to change? That makes a huge difference for the experience. It makes a big difference for brands, for brands like Coca-Cola, and for obviously the movie theaters themselves. I think the other big trend is obviously e-commerce. E-commerce has grown tremendously, but the most important thing to notice is that e-commerce is growing in the grocery category, which had historically really low penetration. And now post-COVID, the grocery channel exploded in commerce. And the problem is, I think everybody thought that COVID was going to be a 2-month or a 2-week thing, and then people are going to go back to their normal lives. Well, no, it became a whole 2020. People have already built memory muscle behind these behaviors. Who is going to now get up from their couch to go to the supermarket? No, they're going to have the last miler do it for them, or they're going to just find another solution. And I think that's the big change. It's not a temporary behavioral change. It's a full-blown change. I think it's the same thing happen for malls. I think the same thing is happening in the beauty category. Beauty has taken this year using augmented reality, using technology to kind of be able to sell products that typically had to be a user experience on site. That's another category that's completely changing their ways. So I think that kind of experience where consumers are now, more than ever, just more open to e-commerce than ever before is a big behavioral change. I think mistrust, actually, no, I think the other big trend we're going to see, and I'm sorry, I'm here rambling, but it's just coming to me naturally, is how social is going to become more private. That's going to make all our jobs much harder. People are shying away from shared experiences or shared communication, and it's becoming much more private. Things in WhatsApp groups. Think of your kids. They usually have their friends on WhatsApp groups. They're not connecting on Facebook groups or on Instagram groups. Those are like pantries of content. That's their pantry of content. Where they're really making the emotional connections is in private spaces where none of us have access to them. And I think that's going to become a big challenge for us as marketing and as communications executives, because how do we break through those areas? And by the way, we just saw what happened with WhatsApp when they were changing their privacy regulation. It was a whole big deal. People are now moving to Signal. So I don't think people are just going to embrace it and say, oh, okay, now I will accept any, ads or any commercial, any communication on WhatsApp. No, people are going to find the most private place to go. So that is a trend that's here to stay. People want a lot of privacy in their communication.
What you're saying, Victor, is it's like the other side. You just said all the trends. This is so true for earned media too, because in order to break through, you have to lean in on these culturally relevant trends. Whatever you're pitching, media has to lean in and meet the moment that the country and consumers are in. If it doesn't make sense in this pandemic world and reality that we're living in, reporters, they don't care. And you have to be credentialed. Where is your credibility? Why are you the right person to be offering this point of view? I think, that's from the earned media side, that is like, I can't triple underline that enough. Like, why should you be out there talking about this?
Yeah. So I'll shut up
April.
now because I gave you a bunch of trends. So I'll be quiet now.
No, that was super insightful. A lot from that. So
I took notes, Victor.
I could go on for like an hour just on trends because that is my favorite topic, by the way. So
awesome. Well, April and Joni, anything to add into the news cycle discussion? How to break into that, because it has been. It's been getting difficult, more and more difficult as the years go on, but I think COVID just kind of heightened the difficulty of breaking through. So any advice on that?
I think, in brand marketing, just being, which was also covered a lot in this, having an authentic voice is very important. The brand maintaining what actually was touched on a little bit earlier, like why are you speaking on this topic? Making sure that all branding is relevant in the most authentic way possible. Continuing with, the current market conditions and what's happening in the current right now market and environment.
I think we've touched on, what the issues are and things, but yeah, I would echo what's been said. I'm still reeling over the trends that
That was a great conversation, and that is all definitely on the way.
Yeah, it was awesome.
We are rounding up on the hour here. I am going to ask one more question just because I want to make sure that it's gotten to. And this is for anybody. Have you begun to start working on back to office plans, and are you anticipating an expectation from employees to be able to continue working from home or a hybrid in office and home schedules? For anybody who's relevant.
No, we haven't, we don't know. I have no idea.
We don't know either. Yeah, it's too soon. So many variables.
We get special permissions, like I said earlier, to go into the office for a special, very, very special meeting, but I don't think we have any long-term plans or have made any, at least that I know of. And honestly, I'm going to be honest, it's not even going to be up to me. It's not like they're going to ask me for my opinion. A lot of this will come from the group level, and they're just going to tell us, okay, this is the plan on how you're going to go back to the office. And right now, they're basically focused on people's health and wellness, and it hasn't really been discussed at large.
And so much of it is going to depend on schools going back. And until schools go back,
Yeah.
parents can't go back. So
I
All right.
covered that in an earlier answer. We actually opened up our offices in mid-June for some core team members. So it was really just 4 of us in this big office space, and the rest of our team remained remote. And we've kind of through a flow over many, many, many months, brought in a few more to work in the office on a hybrid model. And then of course there are team members that aren't, they're not comfortable in coming into an office environment yet. And you have to be respectful of that, going back to the human component. And certainly the way that we run the office here in person is, adhering to social distancing protocols, and, there's a lot of cleaning regimentation and adhering to all guidelines, of course, in office.
I think what I'm saying
Awesome.
is
Well,
more about industry. It's industry based, right? Depending on what your field is. If you're in production, the productions are now going back more with all the precautions, obviously. But then there's other businesses where it's effective to work from home. So.
yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody has been so great. Thank you all so much. We're going to wrap up, and if there's any questions that you have for the panelists, they are happy to answer any questions via email. I don't know if anybody from PRSA has anything to add before we hop off.
No, thank you everybody so much for joining us. If the panelists want to go ahead and quickly add their LinkedIn in the chat, so if anybody wants to connect with them, that'd be great. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll be putting this video up on our YouTube if anybody wants to come back for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.